Behind every bully is a hidden story. Tola's laughter shook the classroom, but her tears in the dark told a different truth. This is not just a tale of bullying, it's a lesson about pain, pride, and redemption that every heart needs to hear. Every storm builds quietly, until it cannot be contained. Tola Adebayo had spent years locking her pain in silence, masking it with noise and cruelty. But pain, like a balloon, expands. And one day, it burst. The day began like any other morning bell. Assembly. National anthem. Announcements. Tola stood in the third row, arms crossed, face blank. Ada, now known quietly as the small girl with the brave heart, stood near the front. There was no tension between them now. Not friendship, but a strange kind of peace. Still, something felt off. Tola hadn't eaten that morning. Her uniform was stained at the sleeve. Her eyes were red, not from sleep, but from fighting tears. And yet, no one asked, "Are you okay?" A trigger so small it happened during English class. The teacher, Mr. Oyai, was marking scripts. He called out scores in front of everyone. Tola Adebayo, 28/100. Laughter rippled through the class. One boy whispered, "That's even generous." Another girl muttered, "Big body, empty brain." Tola stood slowly, face pale, breathing heavy. Mr. Oyai didn't notice, but Ada saw it. Tola's hand shook as she picked up her script. She looked at the red ink, so much red. Then she looked at the class. No one met her eyes. Not even her gang of fake friends. Suddenly, she screamed. A loud, gut-wrenching scream. "Leave me alone." She flung the script across the room. Desks toppled. Students screamed. Tola grabbed her chair and threw it at the wall. Then she broke down, right there, sobbing like a child. "I'm tired. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of being big and stupid and hated. You all hate me. Even the teachers. Even my own mother." Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Even Mr. Oyai stood frozen. Tola collapsed on the floor, fist pounding the ground. Ada ran forward. She knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. Not with fear, but with compassion. Tola sobbed in her arms, like a lost child finally found. Later that afternoon, the school called a meeting. The principal, vice principal, counselor, and a few teachers gathered. For the first time, Tola's story was told. Miss Ijeoma, who had read her anonymous letter, spoke up. "This girl is not a monster. She is a mirror of our failure as a community. We let her fall through the cracks. She didn't become a bully overnight. She was pushed, ignored, humiliated, until bullying was her only armor." Gasps filled the room. Her mother, who had rushed down to the school, sat in stunned silence. When asked about Tola's home life, she sighed. "She's always eating. Always rude. I just thought, if I disciplined her enough, she would change." Miss Ijeoma shook her head gently. She didn't need punishment. She needed understanding. A brave voice changes everything. That evening, at a special school gathering, students were asked to speak about bullying. No one moved. Then Ada stood up. Voice soft, but steady. "I was bullied too. By Tola. She took my food. She mocked me. But I also saw her cry behind the school building. And I realized something. Bullies are not born. They are made from pain no one wants to see. Tola is not evil. She's hurting." Silence. Then, slow claps. A few hands. Then the whole room. Tola, sitting in the back, cried openly. But this time, it was not from pain. It was from relief. The school began a new initiative, a counseling program, peer support groups, anti-bullying workshops. Tola was suspended for 1 week, but not as punishment. It was a chance to heal. During that time, she attended therapy. She wrote apology letters to those she had hurt, including Ada. She even visited her primary 5 teacher, and finally said, "You laughed when I fell. It broke me." The teacher apologized with tears in her eyes. When Tola returned to school, she walked slower, spoke softer. A few students still feared her, but others began to nod when they saw her. She no longer sat at the back. She joined group discussions. She even laughed genuinely. Ada and Tola began walking home together sometimes. Not always talking, but side by side. And that was enough. Tola stood in front of her mirror. For the first time in years, she looked at her reflection and smiled. Not because she had lost weight, not because others approved, but because she had found herself again. And behind that once hard face, there was still the little girl who loved drawing, who still dreamed of being a teacher, and now she believed healing is not a moment. It is a journey. One step, one scar, one choice at a time. For Tola Adebayo, the former bully feared by all, healing meant returning to the very place she broke, but this time, not as a weapon, but as a builder. When Tola stepped back into the school gates after her week of counseling, whispers followed her. There she is. She's back. Let's see how long the change lasts. She heard every word. But for the first time, she didn't let it sink into her bones. She carried her books, wore her uniform neatly, and walked to class with dignity. Ada met her at the door. Tola smiled awkwardly. "You still talking to me?" Ada grinned. "Depends. You still stealing food?" They laughed together. It was small, but it was the beginning of something new. Learning to speak without shouting, Tola used to be loud to hide her wounds. Now, she spoke slowly, thoughtfully, and when she talked, people listened. In literature class, she raised her hand. "Miss, I think Sefi's character wasn't angry because she hated her father. I think she was angry because she felt invisible." The class went silent. Then came the slow nods. Miss Ijeoma smiled. "Excellent point, Tola." 2 weeks later, the school launched a club called Safe Voices. It was Miss Ijeoma's idea, but Tola was chosen as the face of it. At first, students were shocked. How can a former bully lead an anti-bullying club? But Miss Ijeoma said clearly, "Who better to stop the storm than someone who once was the storm?" Tola stood before her peers and spoke her truth. "I was mean. I was cruel. But I was also hurting. Nobody asked why. Nobody saw me. But one girl did. And that changed everything. I don't want to be feared anymore. I want to be remembered differently." Tears fell that day, not just from her, but from others who saw themselves in her story. Soon, Tola started speaking to other classes, then junior students, then other schools in the district. She told her story openly. He shared her pain, her mistakes, her regrets, and most of all, her hope. Children began to come forward. Boys who were being beaten at home, girls mocked for their weight, students who had stopped talking, eating, or even dreaming. Tola listened to them all. She wasn't a counselor. She wasn't perfect. But she was real. And realness has power. One morning, during assembly, the principal stepped forward. He held up a golden plaque. For bravery. For honesty. For leadership. This year's Student Changemaker Award goes to Tola Adebayo. The entire assembly rose. Cheers. Applause. Even teachers clapped with pride. Tola stood there, frozen, tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't won first in class. She hadn't lost weight. But she had done something greater. She turned her pain into purpose. Months later, Tola visited a juvenile center with the Safe Voices Club. There, she met girls younger than her, already hardened, angry, aggressive. One of them, Blessing, shouted, "You don't know what it's like. People hate you before you even speak." Tola knelt beside her and said, "I know exactly what that feels like. But I also know it's not the end of your story." Blessing stared at her, confused. And then, she started to cry. Tola hugged her, gently. That moment would later be remembered as the beginning of Tola's dream. A place where pain becomes power. On graduation day, Ada handed Tola a handwritten note. "I once feared you. Then I pitied you. But now, I admire you. Not because you were perfect, but because you chose to fight your demons instead of feeding them. You changed more than yourself, you changed this school. And one day, I believe you changed the world." Ada Tola cried again. But this time, the tears were joyful. A few years later, in a room filled with young women, Tola stands as a motivational speaker. She's older now. Still big. Still bold. But her eyes no longer hide pain. She tells her story. "I was once the fat girl bully in school. But someone saw my heart. And now, I help others find theirs." The room erupts in applause. From bully to healer. From feared to admired. From broken to whole. The world doesn't change in a day. But sometimes, one life can change the course of many. Tola Adebayo and Eden Okidi, once two girls who stood worlds apart, now stood together. But their paths had been long and winding. And each step had been a lesson in resilience. It's been 10 years since Tola stood before the assembly in high school, accepting her Student Changemaker Award. Today, she's the founder of the Healing Voices Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting young people who have been bullied or marginalized. She travels the world, speaking at conferences, schools, and youth centers. Her message is simple, yet profound. Healing begins with understanding. Understanding begins with listening. Tola had kept in touch with Ada over the years. They had both changed, but in ways that made their bond stronger. Ada had become a successful social worker, specializing in child protection. She was passionate about helping kids who, like her, had endured the silent pain of being ignored or misunderstood. Ada had always been drawn to the invisible wounds of the world, and now, she was dedicating her life to giving those voices the strength to speak. Tola's foundation had become a partner with Ada's social programs, working in schools to teach young people how to recognize bullying, how to prevent it, and how to offer support to those who are suffering in silence. Every year, they held a youth empowerment conference, where students came together to talk about mental health, bullying, and personal growth. Ada spoke about strength through vulnerability. Tola spoke about healing through compassion. Their combined efforts had changed the way schools across the country approached bullying and mental health. One afternoon, Tola and Ada returned to the school where it all began. They walked through the familiar gates, though now, the walls had been repainted, and the playgrounds were filled with young voices that didn't know the pain of the past. At the head of the school was a plaque, unveiled during their visit, the Tola Adebayo Anti-Bullying Center. It wasn't just a room or a building, it was a symbol of how far the school had come. The center was a safe space where students could talk, learn, and heal. Tola stood before the plaque, smiling. Ada, standing beside her, was filled with pride. "I still remember the first day you came to me, asking if you could help," Ada said, her voice soft. "I knew then that you were going to change the world. I didn't know how, but I knew you would." Tola turned to her, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You helped me see that I didn't have to carry the anger anymore. And now, I want to help others do the same. At the head of the school was a plaque, unveiled during their visit, the Tola Anti-Bullying Center. It wasn't just a room or a building, it was a symbol of how far the school had come. The center was a safe space where students could talk, learn, and heal. Tola stood before the plaque, smiling. Ada, standing beside her, was filled with pride. "I still remember the first day you came to me, asking if you could help," Ada said, her voice soft. "I knew then that you were going to change the world. I didn't know how, but I knew you would." Tola turned to her, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You helped me see that I didn't have to carry the anger anymore. And now, I want to help others do the same." At the school assembly, Tola was invited to speak. She stood in front of the students who were once her peers, and those who didn't know her at all. Her speech was simple but powerful. "I once hid behind my pain and made others feel small because of it. But then I learned that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to forgive yourself." Her voice broke, but she didn't stop. "But I've learned that the world isn't made of just victims and villains. We are all part of this healing journey. And we all deserve a chance to rewrite our stories." The students listened, some with tears in their eyes. And when she finished, the applause wasn't out of pity. It was for the woman who had turned her darkest days into the brightest light for others. On her last day at the school, Ada stood next to Tola outside the Healing Voices Center. "This is it," Tola said, smiling. "We've come full circle." Her voice broke, but she didn't stop. "But I've learned that the world isn't made of just victims and villains. We are all part of this healing journey. And we all deserve a chance to rewrite our stories." The students listened, some with tears in their eyes. And when she finished, the applause wasn't out of pity. It was for the woman who had turned her darkest days into the brightest light for others. On her last day at the school, Ada stood next to Tola outside the Healing Voices Center. "This is it," Tola said, smiling. "We've come full circle." Ada nodded. "And we're just getting started. There's still so much to do. So many voices to hear." Tola turned to her friend, her companion on this long journey. "You were the first person who saw the real me. And you gave me the courage to see the real her." Ada smiled softly. "We saved each other, Tola." Years later, Tola stood at the top of a hill, looking down at the city she had grown to love. She had built not just a foundation, but a legacy. The stories of her past no longer haunted her. Instead, they had become the foundation of her future. Beside her, Ada stood watching the sunset as they talked about new projects, new students, and new beginnings. They both knew one thing for sure: the work had only just begun. And their friendship would continue to be the light that led others out of darkness. Adebayo and Eden Nokidi, two women whose journeys from pain to healing helped shape a future of understanding, compassion, and hope. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, subscribe for more African stories, and share to inspire others. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen or experienced bullying? What did you learn from it?